Hey, Joshua.
Jo- Hey, Joshua. Okay, we should be good. Okay, this is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM, and we have with us for an interview two representatives from InterGens from the Goodman Theatre. It's a youth program and a little theater troupe, but it's a great program for youth and lifelong learners. Hi, Liam. Liam Collier, and also Joshua Thomas, who is Liam is the facilitator for one of the facilitators for InterGens, and Joshua is our participant. And okay, Liam, first of all, could you describe for us in more detail about the InterGens?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having us. I love talking about this program. InterGens is a devised theater program that brings young artists, high schoolers, recent graduates, and lifelong learners together to tell stories and create theater that considers the perspectives of people of all ages. We spend about 6 weeks together at a time, and at the end of it, we create some sort of public sharing, some sort of performance where folks can share what they've created and also share the bonds they've created with each other over the time together in the program.
Mm. How did the InterGens program begin?
Yeah, so about 10 years ago, the Goodman's Walter Director of Education and Engagement, Willa Taylor, noticed that uh, the youth in our summer programs, like Play Build and the Musical Theater Intensive, and the lifelong learners in some of our other programs, like Generations, which is a storytelling program for folks 55 and older, a lot of what they were saying in terms of their concerns, their feelings about their relationship to the world were very similar. So Willa really wanted to find a way to get young people and older folks together in a room to talk about that shared humanity and their shared, and that's what InterGens was. It started about 10 years ago, and we've been going strong ever since.
It's awesome. When did you start working with InterGens, Liam?
Well, I started working with InterGens back in 2018. I don't know if you know this, Joshua, but I was actually a student in InterGens before I taught in it. I was interning at the Goodman, and I joined the InterGens program in summer 2018. I had a great time, and I came back and started teaching in the program summer 2019, and I've been a teaching artist and a facilitator in the program ever since.
Awesome, awesome. What's your opinion of your InterGens, Joshua? How was your experience?
My personal experience was really fun. I'm like a huge believer in that the arts brings power, and I'm a huge believer in how myself likes to pursue theater. Like I love to bring characters to life through action and dialogue, and just being able to do that, especially with like the virtual scheme and everything, it was a really fun experience. And I know we basically studied Igor Stravinsky actually. He was an artist at the time and everything inside of the mid to 1800s, I believe. And we studied him and we created pieces of the vast work that were passed down from him and how we seen it through our own eyes and our perspective. And it was very cool to do.
She was also station manager at one time at WZRD, and serendipitously also a member of the recent InterGens cast. And it was she that brought the InterGens to our attention. Okay, so it's very funny. My next question was that have there been any performers who have become students? Well, no, actually, it was a later question. I was asking if any of the alum at the InterGens started working at InterGens, and it's you, Liam. You're one of
It's
them.
me. I'm the guy. Yeah. InterGens students sometimes come back and participate in some of the Goodman's other 10 free programs that we have. Sometimes they reapply for the next session, like Joshua has done. And sometimes they go away for a little bit, but we have some people who come back after being gone for 5 or 10 years. That's one of the great things about having a multi-generational program, is that someone can step away and come back and have a whole new experience 5 years later.
Absolutely. Are there any scholarships available at Goodman Theatre for InterGens alumni?
So we don't offer scholarships, but all our programs are completely free. So they are always accessible to anyone who wants to join them. But I think paying participants to be a part of a program or offering a scholarship would be a great next step to consider for the future.
Yes, yes. How many applications to the InterGens program do you receive every quarter? Just approximately.
It varies wildly, but I would say usually up to like 50 applications per session.
And then about how many do you accept? How many does it vary? How many people are for a cast?
It does vary a lot. This past session we had about 15 people. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joshua. I've done a few of these, but in the past we've had up to 25, or I think 30 was our largest ensemble that we've had.
Can you share with us any insight about what makes for the best candidate for InterGens?
Sure. So when Deb Lewis, who's my fellow teaching artist, and I sit down and look at the applicants, we're generally looking for someone who is just excited to try new things, excited, and especially excited to work with others. InterGens is all about ensemble. It's less about the idea that an individual artist is going to be this brilliant genius who's going to hold the world in their hands. It's all about the strength that we build when we work with others, especially others who are very different from us, who differ in age or location or background, because we learn so much when we have those sorts of interactions. So we're really, looking for that energy and an interest in collaborating.
Yes. So that's well, one of my questions was that an InterGens participant can be participant for more than one time. So that's great. There's and it's great that you're applying again, Joshua. Was spring your first time?
Yes, the spring was actually my first time. It was my very first session with the Goodman. I'm very excited for the summer, years to come.
Of course. And how did you learn about InterGens?
So basically, the theater teacher at my high school, I attend South Shore. I'm currently an 11th grader going into my 12th grade year. My principal, she gave us a forum, said, hey, like the Goodman is having internships for high school students and people beyond, all artists of different kind. You all can build like your knowledge in this field that you all like to pursue. And me being me, of course, I'm like, hey, like this is perfect. Like I should go ahead and apply. And so like I applied and I received a notification that said that I got in. I received more information, and yeah.
Did you have to go into interviews before being accepted? What's the process like?
Basically, I just filled out the application and more so asked like personality questions and like, why do you want to do the things that you would like to do? Like, I believe one of my very first questions that I answered was, why are you excited about InterGens? And I really feel like when you ask an individual, especially artists, those questions, those foster better opportunities for that person to think about why they really want to do the things that they're doing. And also why do they want to do the craft that they're doing so it can strengthen the entire ensemble as a whole. So I was even excited then and there. I was telling my mother, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm very excited for this already. They asked really good questions. So yeah, it was really cool.
It's so Liam, when you select the actors, do you already have a project in mind and then see how the parts fit, or do when the ensemble comes together, they discuss what project they want to pursue?
So Deb and I say all the time that InterGens changes depending on who's in the room. After we've chosen the ensemble, we often will ask them, like, what are things you're interested in exploring? I remember this last session, one of the people we'd accepted said, I always notice that when spring begins, I'm always listening closer to the music that's around me, and it seems to connect to the energy of the season. And we took that and thought, well, there's a very famous piece of music that's all about that, and kind of dove in Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. So the ensemble will influence our starting point, but especially our themes like Rite of Spring are really just a jumping off point. And from there, we do a lot of storytelling, and the ensemble really decides what direction they want to take it. So they definitely have say and a lot of influence over exactly what we're creating a show about.
I did watch one of the shows. I think I couldn't find the spring one at first. I watched the winter one, and I see how the parts dovetailed together. And how long do the participants spend together every week to make such a nice program, dovetailing everything together?
Yeah, Joshua, do you want to talk a little bit maybe about how your group went about doing that?
Of course, from our group, which was the spring session, we met once every Saturday from about 12:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. Central Time. And this was on a Saturday, of course, and it really was a good debriefing, basically, for us to just really come together and create the art that we've created. I know basically like once we started and once we ended, we always did this thing called like ritualing in and ritualing out. And basically like we talked about goals and agendas. And once we disconnected from each other, we ritual out, and basically we talked about what we'll do for the next session. So it was really cool to do.
Okay, so after you end the meeting, then you're doing homework and planning on how you're going to participate in the next meeting based on what just happened, right? Based on the current the meeting that just ended. And then
Yeah.
how much time do you spend together every week? It seems like a lot of planning, but I don't know.
It's about 2.5 hours together as the full-on ensemble every week. Over the summer, it'll be 4 hours because our schedule just changes a little when the school year is not happening. But then in terms of engagement outside of that time, it really varies person to person. Some people just can't commit to more time than that, and we're totally okay with that. We ask people to show up as they are, and as long as they're meeting kind of the requirements of what we call our continued practice, the work you do outside of our session, that's totally fine. Other people like Joshua, I know your group, you met and rehearsed, you created a puppet show and really took the time to get all the details right, to get that exactly where you wanted to. You did deep analysis, I think, of Rite of Spring at one point. So you committed a lot more time outside of our time together in the ensemble as well.
Yeah, it was very cool to meet with Kathleen and a few other individuals. We actually met up over on Zoom, I believe, and we it was like a Thursday evening. We all agreed upon like a time for a contingent and everything, and it was history there. It was really fun.
Nice. What about the sponsors? I see that you have a lot of sponsors for InterGens. Do they suggest any content at all, or they just like hands off?
The sponsors are pretty hands off. I've never had a sponsor reach out and say, you should be doing this. I think that our sponsors really are just interested in the spaces we create and are supportive of the arts and our education programs and all the great work that the Goodman's doing. So the themes and the story we're creating really does come from the teaching artists. Sometimes Willa Taylor will propose something, that's the director of education, and then really the students and the participants who choose where we want to take this story and what stories we want to tell.
Yeah, well, I wasn't thinking that they would force the content on you. I was just thinking sometimes they might be concerned about something and just like suggest something. That's just little suggestions, that's all. Nothing like
Yeah, I haven't had that experience, but we always welcome any input that anyone has, as long as the ensemble remains the center and the decision makers.
Of course. And what about the teaching artists? How do you bring those the teaching artists in? How do you select the artists that will be teaching?
Yeah. So I'm one of the two teaching artists. The other teaching, we use facilitator, teaching artist, kind of interchangeable, but the other teaching artist is Deb Lewis. She's a really brilliant writer who also teaches in our Generations program. And we really love the idea of having a more someone who has that sort of experience working with folks who are 55 and older, and someone like me who's generally worked with high school folks and younger, and bringing that experience together to teach this multi-generational program. So I think we make a pretty good team, but I've also taught this program with Willa Taylor. Some other great teaching artists at the Goodman have held it in the past as well. So it moves around a bit, but it's really just about who has the experience and the interest needed to hold an ensemble like this.
So the Generations program is similar to this, and it's also free. It's also like an ensemble, and then you put out a program at the end of the program, right? A performance.
It is similar. Generations is more focused on writing stories for personal narrative stories for performance. So each session, there's about 200 students in our Generations program, and they meet virtually right now, but before the pandemic, we're meeting all around the cities in various senior centers and churches and parks. And they each write a personal narrative of 5 minutes or less around a theme, and then they work with the teaching artists and with their fellow generation students to refine that story, work on how they're going to perform it, and then they perform those 5-minute stories at the end of the session. I'd say the big difference is that InterGens is, of course, multi-generational, but also is very focused on the creation of ensemble driven work that features lots of people at once and is co-written by a lot of people, whereas Generations is very much about, although a lot of feedback comes in, it's about a writer and their story and their journey in telling it.
How do the participants in InterGens progress to working together as an ensemble?
Yeah, we do all sorts of things. We play a lot of games early on. We also just tell each other stories. Storytelling is such a great tool to get to know another person and to see where they're coming from. We have challenges. We send them off into breakout rooms and tell them to make plays really quickly. I don't know, Josh, what sorts of activities did you find especially helpful in bringing the ensemble together this past spring?
A very cool one, actually. I actually shared with the theater department of high school when we met for one of our last meetings of the year. Was the game where we played where someone started off with an excerpt and we just continued to say it on, and it'll be like, say if you gave me a narrative, it goes like, basically the students were walking down the stairs and someone tripped and fell over a shoelace. But you know what? I think Liam can tell it better. And those type of games were really fun because it gave us like a debriefing session, and we were able to like put our minds off of the work that we were doing and just to naturally have fun through theater, which is also very fun. So that was actually one of my favorite ones that we did.
Yeah, sometimes I think that people think that there's a really complicated formula to getting people of different ages to talk to each other and get to know each other, build ensemble. But we found that when we can just get into a space and try things together and play together and tell stories together, in some ways it happens naturally as long as that space is safe and there's a feeling of respect throughout the ensemble, which is really great.
How do participants change? Joshua, how do you feel that InterGens changed you from when you started and then to when you finished?
So I always say this when I get asked questions like this. At first, I was expecting like a not like necessarily like a normal conversation, but like a Zoom meeting, and like we were just to put on a performance. But as we went through the sessions, and I actually realized that the people that were there and the way like they operated the program was actually beneficial towards us, and it was so ensemble driven. It changed me in a way to whereas I realized you can create forms of art with other people virtually, and inside of this entire range of like perspectives with other artists through different ages and everything, no matter what you plan on doing. So typically for myself, because I am still in high school, I was telling myself, hey, like, okay, well, I'm going to be working with a few people that might fit different age ranges and different backgrounds. Like, that'll be interesting. But I also realized inside of this work that we came together and created an awesome experience. So going forward, just like as a personal artist, I can create art with anyone really, because art is itself is being what it is. So that really changed me for the greater or good, I can say.
So art became interactive with you then.
Much more interactive, and I know how to go past my boundaries rather than just saying like, okay, well, hey guys, we're seniors here in this class, so we're going to make sure we sit here, and it's only going to be seniors doing this assignment because we're seniors of the drama club. No, like, hey, let's bring in freshmen, sophomores, and people from inside of the community and involve them inside this very good form of art that we're doing.
Awesome. Actually, when the clip that I played earlier, it seemed as if there was a child in there as well. Was it an actor that made himself or herself sound like a child, or was it actually a little kid that you also brought into the ensemble?
All of the work that you see in our final performance was created and performed by the folks in the ensemble. So if you hear anything that you're like, is that a child? What's going on there? It's all the ensemble and just their incredible work.
Wow. And then you mean all of those were high school students? Because that sounded really like a child, like a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, something like that.
Yeah, we had high school and college students, recent graduates, and then, yeah, that age on up. So the youngest participant in this ensemble, I think, was 17. It may have been you, Joshua, honestly.
Oh, really? Okay.
I believe so.
You're very, very mature, Joshua. And yeah, I think that well, you gain a lot of insight from InterGens. Okay, what other youth and lifelong learner participants do you have besides those for the speaking parts, such as do you accept talent for design and art, etc.? What categories, if you do?
Yeah, I think we really meet people wherever they are. If they're interested in participating in InterGens, then InterGens is interested in them. So we've definitely had artists in the past. I remember last summer, and your listeners can go back and watch it on our website. We had someone create an incredible stop motion film that was featured in the performance. We've often had folks share collage that they've created. And the image that's used in the InterGens thumbnail and the poster that's used to advertise our final performance was created by Kathleen as a visual artist. Of course, in the puppet show, you see the incredible artistry there. So there are many places for people to fit in. And one of the things we do first in week 1 or 2 every single session is we have a skill share where we just say, hey, come in, you have 1 minute over Zoom, show us what you can do, show us what excites you. And all the different members of the ensemble, some come in and say, I'm a singer, some say, I'm an artist or a photographer. We had someone teach us how to play water polo once over Zoom. So there's a lot of space for people to show up and show us what they do outside of just performing and writing.
Then does the ensemble brainstorm ideas about how to bring those various skills together into the skit?
Yeah, we will often send folks out into breakout rooms on Zoom, their own little Zoom room, to create something, whether it's a short scene, whether it's an interpretation of a story, and we'll invite ensemble members and participants to try to incorporate their skills into the performance. So there's always that invitation, and then the ensemble will step up and look out for other folks and see how to incorporate their work.
Was an earlier version of InterGens just the youth, and then it progressed into InterGens that involved more generations?
InterGens as a program has always been multi-generational from its beginning. But we do have many other programs that are not multi-generational, some of which existed before InterGens. So in a way, our programs like the Play Build Youth Intensive or Generations were the launching point for InterGens. But from day one, as soon as it got that name and we gathered in ensemble together, it's been a multi-generational program.
How do folks usually discover InterGens? If since Kathleen brought it to our attention, usually your participants, how do they learn of InterGens?
I think a lot of people's experiences mirror what Joshua was talking about earlier, that a teacher or someone they know in their community will let them know that this program exists. We always use our network of educators who we work with in our other programs to spread the word, especially to young people. And then folks who are in our Generations program will also find it because obviously we host both programs. And then, we just try to get the word out any way we can on our website, in programs like yours, and just generally so that we can have as many participants as possible.
Mm-hmm. And participants are able to put this work on their resume, right?
Of course. Anything that you create, I say, go ahead, put it on your resume, tell people about it.
Yes. When during the length of the program, if participants have questions, are they able to contact you between meetings?
Yeah, I get a lot of emails all week with questions and concerns, and we do our best to be present, Deb and I, and respond and help folks in the time between meetings so that they can show up ready to do the work.
What are two stories about how InterGens has changed the life of a participant? And if that applies to you, Joshua, by all means, jump in.
Well, I can start us off. I think that InterGens is only ever going to be part of a person's journey towards a life-changing experience, but we're always happy to be a part of that. We've had folks. Something that comes to mind is there's been a lot of conversation in InterGens for the past few sessions about gun violence, and we've seen in a multi-generational way the way that it touches so many lives. We've had participants who have lost family members to gun violence. We've had people who have been in this fight to address this crisis for years, for decades. And I think I wouldn't speak for someone else and say that an experience has changed their life, but I think that the fact having a space to talk about that and having a space to talk about these issues, both with people who are at the forefront of these issues, like our young people and people who have been fighting for solutions for a very long time, has a huge effect. We had a participant last session who, after hearing these stories of firsthand experiences with gun violence, just said, I never thought about it in such personal terms because he personally hadn't had those experiences. And I think we see moments like that a lot, where when you're in a space with people who don't share your life experiences, who don't share your same perspective, either because of age or neighborhood or background or what have you, there's just a way that I think one's eyes can be opened in a life-changing way, and your perspective can be changed in a way that will stick with you for a very long time. And I know that's happened to me sitting in these ensembles as well.
Well, this is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM as we continue our interview with Liam Collier, facilitator, and Joshua Thomas, participant at InterGens at the Goodman Theatre. So does the program, when you met in person, was that in the Goodman Theatre at Fullerton Avenue or downtown?
Yeah, when we met in person, it was down on Dearborn Street in our Alice Center for Education. We're so lucky to have a space in our theater dedicated specifically to our education programs. And we would meet there as many of our programs do. And it's, yeah, really great just to have that space. And I think it makes it clear that the Goodman really commits to education and sees it as an essential part of the work that they're doing. So folks would travel downtown and we would gather in one of our labs and create some art together.
Yes. Okay, Joshua, we could continue with your perspective if InterGens has, you felt has changed your life.
Yes. Personally, I know we looked at different forms of art derived from Igor Stravinsky, and the whole I guess you could say saying of like the adoration of spring and like the rite of spring and how spring brings life really touched bases on like a few like personal issues, I guess you can say, because we tend to like undermine like, hey, like, okay, we just came out of a very, let's say, deep and dark time in the winter time, especially with like the global pandemic and everything. And now we're here in spring and like the vaccine is here. And now we're gonna pursue our life to the fullest. And actually one of the lines inside of our ensemble work is, it had me basically saying to like creatures supposedly that you are alive and everything. And one of the lines that really touched me personally was, the world is blooming more than ever before. Like we've been locked down for a very long time. Like we haven't been able to really do the things we want to do, and we're about to get to that time. And now you're alive, so the world is blooming more than ever before. So go and pursue your dreams. Do what it is you want to do because you are alive. So that really touched me personally, and I tend to stick by that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. About that, do you still remember about at what point the program that you said that? I could kind of like jump to about that part, and then we could play a little bit of it.
Of course. I believe it was towards the ending of the ensemble work. I guess you can say around 5 minutes before the end,
Okay.
and towards the last few scenes with the sock puppet work.
Okay. Here, let's listen into that a little bit. Here, let's start over. Here we go. Yes, that is so beautiful. So listeners, when you sign off later and want to have a taste of InterGens, you could go to the Goodman Theatre and then InterGens Spring 2021, the Rite of Spring, because what I just saw, you wouldn't have seen it, but you heard the beautiful music being played, and then there were the hands and the puppets. So it's very, very beautiful. It's you should view it if you have time. But however, let's continue. That was the music was beautiful. Who was that music that was uh, added from tracks, or was it a member of the ensemble actually performing the music that went along with the puppet show?
That was original music, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joshua, written by Dina Perez, who is a participant in the ensemble and has been a participant in many Goodman programs. Yeah, she wrote that herself, and we included it in the final performance.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay. Okay, now let's do WZRD community assessment with the two of you. WZRD Chicago, being a nonprofit radio station, must be responsible to the community that we serve. WZRD is mandated to file quarterly issues with the FCC on non-entertainment, community-focused programming. So, but we like to assess the community for these quarterly issue topics with 3 questions. The first is, what is most important to you?
Go ahead, Joshua.
Cool. I guess I can start us off. A major, I guess you could say, a non-entertainment social issue that's very important to myself is climate crisis. I'm personally a vegan myself, and I've actually interned in the prior years with the Student Conservation Association. And basically, we just did restoration projects and like forest preserves, like preserve different natural habitats to impose better life amongst the species, to better us in the future, doing things such as planting like milkweeds so that monarch butterflies can thrive and so that they can pollinate our flowers and plants and so forth. So that's a very huge issue that I strongly believe in.
Awesome.
Yeah, this is a huge question. I really struggle with this one. But speaking for myself personally, I think this year in particular, I've been thinking a lot about the issue of safety and what that means. Um, I think about it in InterGens all the time. What does it mean to create a space that is safe enough that everyone can share without fear of being attacked or harmed for the stories they're telling? And how can we build those spaces in all education work that the Goodman does and beyond? And I've also been thinking about a lot in terms of communities. What does it mean to have safe communities? When do we feel most safe, and what sorts of programming and spaces do we need as a city and as a country to fund that maybe aren't getting the funding they need? I mean, I think housing is safety and food security is safety, and safe schools are safety, and so that's a huge issue that I've been thinking about that's very important to me, and that I work on both at the Goodman and as an individual outside of it.
So, well, jumping off there for a bit, Liam, do conflicts sometimes arise among the ensemble members who do have conflicting views, and then or do they usually are? It's a discussion, you know, do the participants actually resolve the conflict on their own, because you know, maybe when they enter and you vet them, and then they're more open to others' views. What happens? Are there conflicts sometimes that you have to jump in to help resolve, Liam?
Well, one of the things we do right at the very beginning is we set a series of group agreements. And one of those that I think is very important is that what's said in the room stays in the room, but what's learned in the room leaves the room. So I want to be careful that I'm not speaking to someone's specific story, but I think one thing I've learned in these spaces is that when there are moments of disagreement, it's really important to take the time to talk about them, and to hear everyone's perspective. I would say there have rarely been moments where conflict has come up that we haven't been able to talk through, and come to an understanding about how we want to move forward. People definitely have different perspectives. We're talking about a huge age range. We're talking about people with vastly different life experiences. But another of group agreements is to assume good intent, assume that everyone is coming from a positive place, and to trust life experiences, that I know me and you know you. So if you're saying that something happened to you, I believe you. And if you're saying something's true for you, I can affirm that and also hold my own truth, and we can find out how we can have that conflict, but still continue to work and communicate together.
And by working and communicating in that way, you learn very much from disagreements.
I think so. I think conflict is essential. And I think that it's the only space really where we can really learn is by having what we believe rub up against things that are challenging to us. So I think that's a very important part of the program.
Yes. Okay. The second question is, what long-term problem must we address? I know that you did mention stuff, Joshua, but let's concentrate on the one long-term problem that we must address. And
So I guess I can start it off. A long-term problem we must address, I guess you can say outside the global climate crisis regimen, is just to make sure all individuals are, I guess, loved and cared for as a whole through a society. So basically, this will be a society that fosters new and better and ample opportunities for someone to be successful rather than them not being able to be successful. So for an example, let's say let's have an equity in basically workforces. Someone does an amount of work that is very viable and it provides a lot of resources to a community, but it's paid at a minimum wage hike, rather than a person that's an entertainer can sit in front of a screen and just read and make a living wage and can support multiple families. So that's something we really need to address, and that will solve like lots of social issues that are intertwined inside of them, because social issues are derived from other social issues, and that's like a very main focal point that I strongly and heavily believe in.
Thank you so much for that, Joshua. Liam?
I totally agree with the idea that social issues are derived from other social issues, that these problems that we face are all interconnected. I was a history major in college, and I think one of the long-term problems we need to address is learning to reckon with our own history as a country. I don't think a lot of us know our history, both because so much of it wasn't written down, because so much of it was destroyed, and also because it's actively, we have a lot of falsehoods that were taught growing up. I think that the reverberations of the founding, I'm putting that in quotation marks, of this country, of slavery and genocide of Native peoples are still being felt today. And I think learning our history so that we can repair or address that harm is essential to reimagining the sort of future you're talking about, Joshua, and dismantling the systems that are still upholding those founding myths that the country was built upon. So I really think history for me is a key in learning and reckoning with that history. And this is huge, obviously, but that's, I think, one long-term problem that we need to address.
Yes, Liam. Let me just pick your brain a little bit. So when you were studying history, was it hard for you to find what actually happened versus what history said happened? Did you do any research on that to make you come to this conclusion?
I think one of the most eye-opening moments for me studying history in college was the idea that just because we don't have a written discussion of what someone was thinking and feeling at a time doesn't mean that those thoughts and feelings aren't something we can consider or something that is legitimate, that we can project our understandings of the world into the past. And that was huge for me because it means that we can think about what enslaved people were experiencing because we know what it's like to be human. And we also know what trauma is now. And we can think about what has happened to, just because we don't have a written history, say, of a Native person at the time, we can talk to people who are still around today. These people are still here, and they have these stories, and they tell us. So it you know, I think unpacking whiteness is always a difficult thing, I think, but it's also it just opens so many doors and so many understandings of our past and our present and our future that it's also a really inspiring thing to study and to come to understand.
So is this your your perspective on human history versus written history? Is that kind of what made you a good facilitator for InterGens, Liam?
It's very kind of you to say I'm a good facilitator. I hope that I am. I don't know. Maybe. I think that there's always a lot of history in those rooms, and there's always a lot to learn. I think the first summer I participated in InterGens, our theme was 1968. And I was in a room with people who lived through 1968, which was the year that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, the year of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, where we saw a huge amount of police violence against protesters, and really a turning point for our country's history. And it was really inspiring and important to hear the stories of the people who were on the ground at those protests. 50 years later, to have them say, we see ourselves in you and here's what we learned. And for us to say, here's what we're experiencing. What does that tell us about what happened back then that you may not have seen at the time? So yeah, I think the human element of history is very important and can open a lot of doors in a learning space.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the last question for the community assessment is, what problem needs to be resolved now?
I'll start so that Joshua can have the last word. But something that's on my mind that I think we need to resolve right now is this crisis of democracy that we're facing in this country. We see this in voter suppression laws that are passing all across the country. Most recently, some were stopped in Texas. But I think that, and again, speaking as an individual, I think that we need to get democracy everywhere we can get it. I think we need to push back against voter suppression, but we also need to have more democracy here in Chicago. You know, we're seeing pushes for people to have the power to elect our school boards, and we're seeing lots of activism around people having a say in how we're policed through democracy. But we also need democracy in learning spaces. This is what's so great about, I think, non-hierarchical ensemble-based programs, is that it lets the people who are experiencing them have a say in what they're learning, what they're creating. So yeah, that was long-winded, but I think a problem we need to resolve right now is to just increase the presence of democracy, fight for it where we have it, and expand it where we don't.
I strongly agree with Liam for what problem that needs to be addressed right now. Increasing democracy, and just to touch bases back on the equity notion that I mentioned earlier, just basically differentiating equity versus equality, because you can't give someone equality based on a group of situations that are not alike. No situation is like the other. So if we use equity to equate each situation by its own terms within its own means, then you have problems that are solved, and that can also be solved through democracy and other political regimes that support the well-being of all of its people, rather than just supporting the whole notion of individuals that doesn't necessarily fit just a small array of individuals in its entirety.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay. Well, do you have any announcements or deadlines about InterGens that you would like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, well, I want to let folks know that they can learn more about the program at goodmantheatre.org/intergens. That includes information about how to apply to upcoming programs. You could probably still sneak in and get into the summer program if you jump on it now. So yeah, check us out, goodmantheatre.org/intergens, and just peruse our website. There's so many exciting, totally free programs happening at the Goodman, and some exciting free programming coming up as well in terms of performances. So yeah, that would be my announcement.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I guess my announcement would be just to have fun. If you all do it, it's very fun. It's very fun to bring characters to life through action and dialogue. And I'm excited to meet all of you. Good luck.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Liam Collier and also Joshua Thomas, Liam is the facilitator, and Joshua is a participant in InterGens at the program at the Goodman Theatre. And as we sign off, thank you so much, gentlemen, for interviewing with the WZRD. And we will continue playing more excerpts from the spring 2021 InterGens program. Thank you very much.
Thank you.